Hello, dear listeners and viewers. This is our channel. We present today about realism. Have you ever thought how states act in international relations? The key mainstream perspective on global politics are realism and liberalism. If you open your television, you can hear war and peace, agreements and disintegration, competition and cooperation, about trade, law, war, attacks, and others. Television or the YouTube channels are full of competition and cooperation. As I said earlier in the previous video, international relation is about conflict and cooperation. In the international relation, we cannot use a single theory, or in other words, no single theory reliably explains the wide range of international interaction. Realism is one of perspective that we can analyze, or we can make analysis on international interaction among states. And realism has historically held a central position in the study of international relations. So what is realism? It is termed as political realism, and it is a school of thought that describes international relations in terms of power. It claims to offer an account of world that is realistic, so that can be said realism is hard-headed, devoid of wishful thinking, deluded moralizing. In addition, the exercise of power by a state towards each other is termed as realpolitik, or just power politics. Realpolitik is a German coinage which refers about power of politics, or the reason of the state. It is used to explain an important action for the state to take, that is, state's motive for an action. Realism, as a school of thought, centers itself on the assumption that the international relation or system is anarchic. Anarchy refers about the term that implies not a complete chaos or absence of structures and rules, but rather the lack of central government that can enforce rules. There is no central government to help out when small states are attacked by big ones, or when small states are attacking one another. There is no central government. In this context, the international system of states lacks such system, and ultimately ineffectual in the regulation of relations between states. So conflict is inevitable, and continual feature of international relations occur. The realist school puts the concept of power at the center of all behaviors of the nation state. The failure of idealism to prevent World War II resulted in the emergence of realism as alternative school of thought. The liberal tradition or idealism emphasizes about international law, morality, international organizations than power alone. Idealists think that human nature is good, whereas realists view human nature as bad. They have an assumption that states have the potential to work together to overcome mutual problems. Idealists differ from realists in the sense that human nature is good and can change. For idealists, the principle of international relation comes from morality. But for realism and advocates of realism theory, it is different. They believe that idealism failed, for international conflicts are inevitable and unavoidable. As the discipline of international relation took shape following World War I, it drew particularly heavily on liberal ideas and theories, especially about the desirability of conducting international politics within the framework of moral and legal norms. From the 1930s onward, such liberal ideas were subject to increasing criticism by realist theorists, who highlighted what they saw as inescapable realities of power politics. This made international relation as a divided discipline, or a battleground between realism and liberalism. After the so-called first great debate within the international relation, the new version of realism and liberalism had appeared. We will see it later. Realists also ground themselves on long tradition. Prominently, the following thinkers are identified for their realpolitik propensity or political philosophy: Sun Tzu, Thucydides, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Hans Morgenthau. Let's see their thought. The Chinese strategist Sun Tzu, who lived 2000 years ago, advised the rules of the state, how to survive in an era when war had become a systematic instrument of power. For Sun Tzu, a moral reasoning was not very useful to the state's rule of the day, faced with armed and dangerous neighbors. Thucydides, who lived around Greece, wrote an account of Peloponnesian War. Thucydides' account was written focusing on relative power among the Greek city-states. Thucydides stated as follows: "The strong do what they have the power to do, and the weak accept what they have to accept." Nicolo Machiavelli is a philosopher who lived around the Renaissance period, around 1500. Machiavelli argued in his book called The Prince as follows: Prince to concentrate on expedient actions to stay in power, including the manipulation of the public and military alliance. Machiavelli, in his account, refers to excessively manipulative power maneuvers. The other political philosopher who supported realism or power politics is Thomas Hobbes, who lived around 17th century. Hobbes discussed the free for all that exists when the government is absent and people seek their own self-interest. Hobbes called it state of nature or state of war. It is a law of the jungle, in contrast to the rule of law. Where there is no law, there is law of jungle. Hobbes is another political thinker who supported power politics, supported strong monarchy, and Leviathan. Hans Morgenthau is one of the 20th century philosopher. Power politics. He argued that international politics is governed by objective, universal laws to be based on interests defined in terms of power than morality. He stated that no nation had God on its side, and thus that all nations are to base their actions on prudence and practicality. Realists tend to treat political power as separate from predominant over morality, ideology, and other social economic aspects of life. For realists, ideology, religion, and cultural factors do not matter. They emphasize on choice of states operating as autonomous actors, rationally pursuing their own interest or national interest in the international system of sovereign states without a central authority. So, what are the key assumptions of classical realism? The key assumptions of classical realism are as follows. 1. They have pessimistic view of human nature. They see human being as nasty, brutish, violent, and full of fear of violent days. 2. Human nature is bad, characterized by egoism or selfishness and greedy. As Machiavelli's theory of politics refers about dark, negative model of challenges, human nature for him is arrogant, crafty, shifting, malignant, violent, and savage. And Hobbes asserts humans are driven by non-rational appetites like aversion, fear, hopes, and desire, the strongest of which is the desire for power after power. That's why people never say, "I'm satisfied." And there is egoism, concerns for one's own interest or well-being or selfishness. They believe that one's own interests are morally superior to those of others. Third, politics is the domination of human activity structured by power coercion. Fourth, states prioritize self-interest and survival and order security above all else. Fifth, states operate in a context of anarchy and thus rely on self-help. What do we mean by anarchy? Anarchy is a term that implies not a complete chaos or absence of structure and rules, but rather the lack of central government that can enforce rules. In other meaning, or in simple term, there is no central government where states go to be helped out when they have problem or when they are aggressed by other states. In addition, security dilemma is another term. It is the negative consequence of anarchy in international system, or it is a situation in which states' action taken to ensure their own security threatens the security of other states. The response of those other states, such as deploying more of their own military forces, in turn threaten the first state. The dilemma is the prime cause of arms race in which states spend large sums of money on mutually threatening weapons that do not ultimately provide security. 6. International relations are necessarily conflictual and that international conflicts are ultimately resolved by war. 7. Global politics is structured by distribution of power or capabilities among states. 8. The balance of power is the principal means of ensuring stability and avoiding war. Balance of power refers to the concept of one or more states' power being used to balance that of another state or group of states, or it is any ratio of power capabilities between states or alliances. and it can be also a process by which counterbalancing coalitions have repeatedly formed in history to prevent one state from conquering an entire region. Balance of power theory asserts that such counterbalancing happens regularly and maintains stability of the international system. 9. Ethical consideration or moral considerations are irrelevant to the conduct of foreign policy. So in the conduct or in the debate with regards to criticism of realism that felt that the theory or realism merely or simply focused on state as primary actor and neglected other actors such as IGOs, NGOs, ethnic groups and religious movements, and focusing on security issues and economic concerns, it is criticized by other schools like liberalism. In order to count the critics and due to rising economic concerns, the realist school generated a new work in the 1970s and 1980s, that of Neo-Realism. Neo-Realism is a theory that emphasized realist themes of state, power and conflict, at the same time advocating that the economy plays a great role in interstate relations. Neo-realists believed that balance of power served as a mechanism for the international political system, and the nature of international relations was determined by the character and number of its great powers. Neo-realism, sometimes called structural realism, is a 1990s adaptation of realism. It explains patterns of international events in terms of the system structure, the international distribution of power, rather than in terms of the internal makeup of individual states. Compared to traditional realism, neo-realism is more scientific in the sense of proposing general laws to explain events. But neo-realism has lost some of the richness of traditional realism, which took account of many complex elements like geography, political will, and diplomacy. Realists favor states. Then what is the difference between realists and neo-realists? Kenneth Walsh mounts the state and the war, and his later theory, International Politics, defines the concept of neo-realist agenda. Walsh focuses on the international system and seeks to provide a structuralist account of its dynamics and the constraints it imposes on its state of behavior. Walsh focuses on the structure of international system and its consequence of IR. Walsh's approach concerned that international politics is basically a struggle for power, but challenging the view that is the result of human nature. For Walsh, international system is anarchical and hence perpetually threatening and conflictual. What is the difference between realists and neo-realists then? Realists favor states while neo-realists favor the system as a causal factor in the behavior of states. Neo-realists view international political system as one with a precisely defined structure. Hence, neo-realism is a greater advance beyond the classical realism. All in all, realists of all types, both classical and neo-realists, give importance to the military or political sector, as opposed to the economic, social, or environmental ones. Therefore, the general assumptions of realism are the following. 1. Anarchy. Anarchy is the structure of international system which is characterized by absence of world government. In other words, we mean there is no common government or a government that enforces the international rules. There is an absence of world government ruling above sovereign states. The second assumption of realism is actors. Actors are states which are the principal and most important. States are key units of analysis. It is the sole rational actor with the capacity of making decisions too. The states may be overrun by different international organizations and transnational organizations, non-governmental organizations. In case of less interest of states, there is less probability to be overrun in cases of high interest of the state. Third is goal. National interest defines state's goal. It might be military, strategic, and economic. There might be hierarchies of issues, but national interest is always at the top. The fourth one is system structure. The whole international system is accounted by the distribution, balance, and hierarchy of power across the various actors in the system. Fifth, outcomes. Realists believe that relative gains are more important than absolute gains. Relative gain means one state will gain and the others loses because every state goes for its national interest and not for mutual benefit. 6 is capability. The behavior of a state in international system depends on power capability. 7. Dominant issues. Military and related political issues like security issues are important. There are issues of high politics, while economic and social issues are viewed as issues of low politics. Those with strong power capability will win in international system. 8. Type of action. Military and diplomacy are the two dominant types of action. 9. International cooperation. Realists are pessimistic about international cooperation. For them, cooperation is impossible in such anarchic international system because all states strive or work to achieve their own national interests. 10. International institution. International institutions do not have the capacity to limit anarchy, and there is no as such superordinate authority to rule over state actors. So, in summary, realism is about power politics. Realism starts with the assumption that the world is anarchy because there are no global permanent body that states go to and appeal help. When they are invaded, there is no international government that helps or help them out or prevent them from invasion. The good example is Russian and Ukrainian war. Russia has invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine hasn't been helped by any government because there is no international government. When a state gets in trouble, it can't go to international policeman or cannot ask for a favor to be helped out. As a result of anarchy, as we discussed earlier, realists assert or claim the states are the prime actor that have role in international relations first. Majorly, security, self-security, self-power, or motivation comes from maximizing their power or national interest than mutual cooperation. So states, according to realism, act on the motive of strategic and material gain. Strategic refers about the benefits the states gain individually, while material gain refers about economic and trade advantage. So overall, it is about maximizing the security. So realism is power politics, where we have two major issues: anarchy and balance of power. I'll see you in the next video. We are going to present for you about liberalism and neo-liberalism. Stay tuned, subscribe, share and like for more. Thank you for listening.